The trail of the 3rd Army and the 19th Tactical Air Command of the 8th Air Force is marked by more than 40,000 white crosses. 40,000 dead Americans.
We were young and soldiers called to dedicate our lives in the name of God and country. Do what's just, boys. Go do what's right. A hot band of brothers waiting on our chance to add one more page unto the victory dance. Here am I, Lord, send me, send me. Victory lies in the spirit of the lives of the men who died for me.
Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I. Send me."
This is Michael Broderick, Marine Corps veteran, actor, and Gallant Few board member. You are listening to the New American Veteran. Now here's Carl Monger.
Hey, this is Carl Monger with Gallant Few's The New American Veteran. It's my privilege today to welcome Joe Lee to the show. Joe is a Marine Corps veteran and combat correspondent, and although he will say he didn't spend any time downrange, but he works now with the USO, where he does, no pressure here, for a complete amateur journalist to interview somebody that's been school trained by the Marine Corps and now works for the USO. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We have a mutual friend, Jill Stevenson, and Jill got me connected to you. So shout out to Jill. Thank you for getting me connected to Joe. And she's a great gal, isn't she?
Oh, she's fantastic. One of the best women I know.
Okay, Joe. So tell me your time in the Marine Corps. When did you enlist and how long did you serve?
So I enlisted in 1997, November. And let's see, I first joined as a truck driver. I had kind of little idea what I really wanted to be when I grew up, and so I knew I wanted to get out of the house and exploring the world. And so my dad signed for me to join when I was 17. I joined as a motor transport operator as a 3531. Went through school at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And then ended up doing well. I was an honor graduate there, and so they transitioned me into a more advanced truck, which is the Logistics Vehicle Systems, LVS operator, which is a 3533. And so I was it's a big 22.5 ton, container boat trailer hauler, so it's a pretty cool vehicle to drive, and I did that for a long time. My first duty station was in Okinawa. Spent 2 years in Okinawa, extended over there. Met my first wife, who was a active duty Marine over there, and transitioned from there to, it was an interesting transition. She and I got married on leave. We're no longer together, but we got married on leave, and she had orders to Barstow, California, and I had orders to Hawaii. And
that makes it kind of difficult to maintain a relationship that way.
Well, yeah. Well, the Marine Corps is usually really, and the military in general is usually pretty good about keeping married couples together. And so that was, part of the motivation. What kind of drove such an early and abrupt wedding was to, kind of help that along and keep us together where we might otherwise be separated. And so we got married while on leave. I was the senior of the two of us. I was a corporal at the time. She was a lance corporal. And I had, my orders executed first. So, in my wishful thinking, I, thought that maybe, the Marine Corps would send her to me. We'd both end up in Hawaii and live happily ever after. Well, that's not how it worked out. So I went to Hawaii for a total of about 2 weeks, and then the Marine Corps turned me.
Did you have to go to Barstow?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They turned me around and sent me to Barstow, so where we were stationed for about 3 years. They didn't even have a motor pool in Barstow, so what I ended up doing out there was preserving and depreserving vehicles for long-term storage in a big dry lot at a place called Yermo. It's an annex out there next, really close to the National Training Center for the Army. And so out there we have a big dry lot where we store vehicles and equipment for long periods of time, especially during peacetime, which it was at this time. And while I was stationed there, 9/11 happened, and our entire mission reversed. We went from preserving vehicles and draining their fluids and wrapping them with plastic and keeping them safe from the wind and weather to depreserving them, filling them back up through with fluids and taking the shrink wrap off and test driving them. Well, at that time, most of these guys that were working in this warehouse out in the middle of the desert were all engineers, mechanics, folks that weren't operators. The only reason I was there as an operator was because I was, had traveled along with my wife there. So it was kind of a funny situation because they basically gave me a license to drive all these vehicles in the fleet that I would have never had the opportunity to drive. LAVs, tanks, all kinds of cool stuff, and my job was to test drive them out and test drive those vehicles and basically try to break them if I could successfully break them.
Man, what a cool job! That
yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when you were talking about having to put those vehicles in storage, drain the fluid, do all the inspections, and I've gone through turning in vehicles before as a fleet changed over from the old ITV tow-mounted 113 carrier to the Humvee tows. And
right.
That process of getting those vehicles ready for storage, I mean, that's, oh God, it's you just want to stab your eyes out because
yeah.
It's so tedious and you don't see the value of what you're doing, but then you had the opportunity to immediately see the value when 9/11 happened. Now you understood why you were going through all of that, and then to reverse that process, that had to be something that was very motivating. It had to be a big change in attitude for the people that were there, and then icing on the cake to be able to go out and test drive and try to break that stuff. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was a really unique experience being able to kind of be there when that shift happens because you're right. It's kind of mind-numbing work. Just basically, putting shrink wrap on windows and tape on lights and all these other things, and it's just over and over and monotonous every day, and it's the endless job that just never ends. And then when you kind of get to see why you're doing it all and then reverse the process, it's kind of neat because I wasn't able to break many things. So
what was the most fun vehicle that you operated during that time?
I still got to probably bring it back to the old classic Humvee. It was just nothing more fun than just tearing around on that. Actually, or even the little Willie, like we had these old Willys Jeeps that we used to drive around the lot.
Do you have any contacts back there where somebody might still be able to buy one of those? I would love to have one.
Oh, right. We recently went through there and I tried to reach out to do some interviews there, or at least because I was traveling with the USO last year on a storytelling mission called Route 75, where we visited pretty much every stateside USO center in the country, and sponsored by Jeep, and they gave us a couple Jeeps to drive around in, and so I thought about stopping by Barstow. We were on our way to Vegas, and so I was trying to stop by Barstow and see if they had any of those. Turned out they weren't actually the Jeep brand or Willys Jeeps that I thought they were. They were a similar military version.
AM General or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think it was an AM General version of it. So it wasn't quite the Jeep I was looking for, but it would have been a cool story to tell because Jeep and the USO share a birthday. So that was kind of what the partnership was about.
That's pretty cool.
Why?
Okay, so I want to move along here from that. How did you get to being a photojournalist?
Well, funny story there. So, throughout my time, my first 4 years in, I was always looking to try to do something more with my time. There was a time period, while I was in Okinawa where I went to what's called Water Survival Instructor School, so the McQuist program, where they basically just asked, platoon, anybody here swim? And I was like, sure, I can swim. And I had an older brother that liked to drown me as a kid, so they sent me to do the prereq tests, which was pretty grueling little kind of prerequisite tests that you do. It's underwater swim and a brick tow and 500-meter swim in a timed distance swim. And so I met the qualifications, and it turned out I was pretty much the only one in my battalion to make the qualifications. And so I went and did this course. It was a 3-week-long course, and it was pretty grueling. It's probably one of the, I ended up in my career did it twice for some reason. Unbeknownst to me, the Marine Corps let my certification expire, not for my lack of trying to recertify. And when that happens, you have to go back and do it again. And it's a really tough course. And so after going through that course, I went through it with a bunch of guys that were all infantrymen from, Schwab. They're mostly all from recon. And, they all were going through this course. And by the time I'd finished it with them, they told me that, I should try out for recon. They're like, hey, the swimming portion's usually where most guys, fall out of the recon indoc. And so that was motivating as a young Lance Corporal. I was like, well, hey, if I can.
That's quite a compliment when those guys tell you that.
Right. I was like, well, if I can hack this, and if they're telling me I should do the indoc, I should try this. So I went through the indoc, and as far as I know, I did well. I made it through the whole thing. We did a couple PFTs and did spent all night in the pool at Hansen, and it was tiring as all hell, but I was there at the end and was awaiting orders. And we never got him. There was me and one other guy who both went through it together. We were both LVS operators, and our monitor had told us that we were too needed. We were too needed in our MOS, that there weren't enough of us, and we were too needed. And so we said, all right. And so went on, kept doing my job. I was FAP'd out for a while. FAP'd is a kind of temporary duty with what was called at the time Special Operations Training Group, which is a unit that recertifies and keeps current the training for the 31st MU out in Okinawa, part of 3MEF. And now they're called, I believe, EOTG, Expeditionary Operations Training Group. So spent some time with them, then kind of came back to my unit and still wanted to do something cool. So I tried to do MSG duty. The mobile training team, or the mobile team, came out to do interviews for MSG. And so I put in for that and tried to do that, and didn't get my monitor to approve that one either. So I was kind of stuck doing my job, and I was like, well, that's, I guess God wants me to drive these trucks. So, I kept doing that, and that was what I was doing when I rotated out back to, Barstow. And then, the war started. And the funny story is about this all is that I enlisted in November of 1997. Well, 4 years later, when my enlistment ended, was November 2001, right? When you have to wait until the fiscal year in which you enlisted to re-enlist. And so if it's, if you enlisted in November, the fiscal year starts in October. So you have to wait until October 1 to actually file re-enlistment papers. Well, as it so happened, a war started, 2 weeks prior to October 1st, 3 weeks prior to October 1st. And believe it or not, all the boat spaces for motor transport filled up. So I couldn't even stay a driver as a truck driver in the military. If I wanted to stay in the Marine Corps, I was kind of forced to make a lateral move. So I had to choose a different job, essentially, if I wanted to stay in. And so one of my good friends at the time, I was also a range coach at what we call PMI, a primary marksmanship instructor. And I was working out at the rifle range pretty regularly. And one of the guys out there that I knew that I coached and taught with, I just loved his job. I didn't know what he did, but he, all I know is that at morning formation, he was never in formation. He was always that guy standing on the side of the formation with a camera, or he's behind the podium, reading warrants and things like that. and he seemed like he was getting out of a lot of the most tedious work that we all had to do. And I'm like, I don't know what you do for a living, but I certainly never see you at PT in the morning. So I asked him what he did, and he told me that he was a writer for the base newspaper. And of course, at that time I said, well, we have a base newspaper? That's that's interesting. And so it turned out, that was what I was cleaning my barracks windows with every day. I just hadn't noticed it. And so I went to work for the base newspaper. I kind of did on the job training for a little while. Probably, I think it was like 6 months of on the job training in Barstow, and worked for the newspaper every day, went out and covered stories, took pictures, and then when they got me a seat at Defense Information School, which is out here at Fort Meade in Maryland, they sent me to school. And so that school was about 3 months long, I believe. It was basic journalism school, and send you out there to school, and finished that up, and went back to Barstow, and then when my wife re-enlisted, she got to re-enlist for an incentive to re-enlist, and so her incentive was to get orders to Hawaii. So we ended up heading back over to Hawaii.
So you got to go there anyway.
So we did. So we did finally get to Hawaii. So that's where I spent the last couple of years in. Finished my degree there. Worked for the Hawaii Marine newspaper. I was a editor of the mostly sports section of the base newspaper, but there was periods of time where we were sending so many of our staff downrange that the way it worked out, it was kind of funny. I was a little bitter about it at the time, because I was a sergeant, and there were several other sergeants in the office that we were chomping at the bit to get downrange, but we for the life of us, every time a billet would open up to attach to 3rd Marines or attach to 112 or another unit heading downrange, they'd always select the newest private or newest lance corporal and newest lieutenant that we'd get, and be like, all right, you're going. And I guess the logic, in hindsight, the logic was probably that we have a base newspaper to run, and the people that have been writing it and running it probably need to stay there and do that.
Yeah, that's pretty tough though, for you to have a war going on and you're not able to get over there. That's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, it was frustrating for a lot of us, especially the sergeants. I mean, it was all the senior enlisted guys who were just like, kind of upset about it. But as time goes on, you realize, the mentality or logic behind it. So, when I finished my degree, I kind of, it was time to rotate out. And I figured I was always kind of curious. I wanted to chase, a profession in the civilian world. After my first 4 years, of course, the war started, and I feel like I had to stay in and get some. And 2, I hadn't finished my degree. I was still working on a college degree at the time, and my dad was just absolutely against me getting out of the service without a degree. So he was advising me to stay in, do your time. Hopefully you get downrange. And well, of course he didn't say hopefully you'll get downrange.
So tell me about in journalism school. Can you cover a couple of things that they taught you? I've never been to journalism school, so other than looking good and having a microphone, right. What kinds of things do they teach you, skill set?
Well, there's a range of things. It's really kind of probably a broader spectrum than most J schools. So we, you had your basic kind of writing courses where you learn news writing and sports writing and feature writing, and you learn how to write a press release, and you learn how to write headlines, and you learn how to lay out and design a newspaper. And at the time, I think it was Quark we were using to lay out and design a newspaper. Could have been PageMaker at the same time, or these days, Adobe, probably. So there's you learn all of that. So there's the print side, and then there's several folks that might do broadcast journalism, things like that. But for the basic combat correspondent course, it was press releases, news writing, feature writing, sports writing, that sort of stuff. And then you learn kind of the PR side of how to advise for an interview, how to give an interview, how to receive one, how to conduct one, being on camera, how to speak on camera, that sort of stuff. And then there's some community relations aspects and how to deal with press and media queries from outside, to be a public relations office and to deal with, outside media queries about the base, about operations going on base, about, how to answer those and how to get responses and how to, be honest and truthful and try to get as much out as you can, while keeping,
Being able to stay on your message.
right. Being able to stay on message, but it's not. It's more about trying to get as much information out as possible without compromising, safety or security, right, or anything like that. So it's less about spinning any kind of message and more about just being able to get it out and make sure it's accurate and make sure it's not going to compromise anybody's safety or security.
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break. I've got a couple of ads that I'm going to play, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about second half now. We've gone through military career. Now we'll talk about post-military, where you've gone.
Great.
Sound fair? Good.
Yeah.
They teach you a lot in the service. They teach you how to stand straight and fire your rifle. They teach you respect and survival. They teach you how to take a life and how to give your own. What they don't teach you is what happens when you come home. There are over 2 million people in the U.S. Armed Forces. For some, coming home is the hardest part. As a veteran, you are not alone. Reach out, call a battle buddy, and take the Spartan Pledge today. For more information, visit us on the web at descendantsofsparta.com.
Farming does everything for me. Absolute mental bliss. I mean, it's everything wrong disappears as soon as I'm on the wall.
Climb on.
Thank you, Metroport Rotary.
Okay, and we're back. So back with Joe Lee with the USO. Joe is the senior multimedia journalist for the USO. So Joe, did you go straight from the military to work for the USO, or talk about your transition and what you went through there?
Sure. I wish it was an easy transition. I was getting out of the service, on a little island in the Pacific and trying to figure out where I was going to live, who I was going to work for. I was, putting out applications with, brands like the USO and other brands that I was interested in working for. And I wish I would have just got a job offer, right away and been able to make a smooth transition. But, of course, it didn't work out that way for me. And I was fortunate enough to, one, have finished my undergrad at that time, and two, had worked in a MOS that supplied me the ability to communicate my skills and experience and expertise and in a field that actually is transferable to the civilian world. So I really had a lot of optimistic views at the time. Really hoped for the best. Thought I would easily get a job, no problem. But when I transitioned out, I went back to the Bay Area, Northern California, and it wasn't all that easy. I bounced around for a little bit. For a while, I tried to do some entrepreneurship ideas and work with a a business owner that I know that was very successful, and so I tried to learn under him. He made his millions selling pianos, and had an idea to sell kind of green, energy friendly and environmentally friendly hot tubs in Northern California that were made in Northern California and required no chlorine or anything like that. And they were they were cool hot tubs. Had little iPad docking stations and such. And so I thought, this will be easy to do. I could easily sell this stuff. And so we built this business kind of together, and he was kind of showing me the ropes. And of course, all of a sudden, this was 2007. 2008 or so. So
right before the economy did a big crash.
That's right. And so all at once, everybody stopped buying luxury items, things like hot tubs. you don't tend to buy when you're going into a recession. So
right. Yep.
So that business dried up pretty quick. So at the time, I was delivering pianos for him and helping out with his business. And so then I needed to get a real job. So I started looking out there again. Still floating resumes out there, and ended up taking an internship, a paid internship with a company called Fireman's Fund Insurance Company, which was in Nevada, now owned by Allianz, a big insurer out of Germany. And they hired me on at the time as a corporate communications intern, which I really kind of saw the benefit of that, and being able to kind of give me some more civilian experience, some more real office experience, cubicle time, to really kind of polish up my inner office skills and corporate communication skills that outside of the military. So it was a paid internship. I didn't make a lot. I think it was like $15 an hour at the time, which in the Bay Area really doesn't pay your rent.
Doesn't go very far, no.
Yeah. But I made it work, and they, I worked real hard, and they got me into, almost immediately, kind of positioned me on a team of folks who were building a kind of a new line of business, or they were working on it. It was called it's a software as a service project to basically create a system for this, this is a more a high net worth type insurance company, kind of more like the Hartford or one of those that they insure things that are difficult to insure, J-Lo's body parts, or a Hollywood film, or somebody's 6 yachts and 4 properties in 3 different countries, kind of thing. So it's difficult to get a quote in any kind of timely fashion. So they were trying to develop an online quote turnaround system that could be done in a matter of 24 or 48 hours, to try to keep up with folks like Geico and other insurers who had these quick turnaround systems for at very least their auto line, if not other lines. So I was helping them develop. Basically, my role was kind of as a basically a project coordinator. Essentially, I was the SharePoint guru. I had to learn SharePoint and master that, and keep all the meeting minutes on SharePoint, and communicate between the business side, who I worked with, and the field IT guys who were running into bugs and errors. And so I had to kind of help translate a little bit of what those bugs and errors meant for the business side, and determining what the cost was, what the problem was, how it it was affecting the user. So I started getting into user experience and kind of understanding how people are using the software, and what what problems they're running into, and then having to explain what might be kind of IT speak to the business side, and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is why it's such a big deal. This is why you've got this side freaking out over here. This is why it's a big deal, because when the customer goes through, they experience this, the whole thing shuts down on them. They get frustrated, and they're not even going to do it again. So I found that really interesting and fun. But over a period of about a year, it wasn't really turning into a full-time position. So right around that time,
But there are some things that you do to get experience. And
sure.
One of the things that, just kind of a side note, a lot of veterans that I see as they go through transition, they don't realize that they're not going to go from what they did in the military to something that's equivalent, even in pay and responsibility, when they leave.
Right.
And sometimes you have to go somewhere at a lower level, but you gain that experience, you develop the relationships, and then you're able to accelerate later on. So back to you.
Exactly. So, you really have to humble yourself when you come out. You can't expect that, one, you're going to even get paid the same thing you got paid before. The figuring out your pay is a totally different thing. There's a lot of things that are covered for you when you're in the military, like, your housing, your food, a gym membership, health insurance, all these things are covered and you don't even think about it. When you get out, these are expenses that you need to think about, and expenses that your salary needs to compensate for. So you need to make sure that one, you're definitely you know how much you need to live. The same salary in the military is not going to cut it for you in the civilian world for sure. But it's also about kind of humbling yourself and making sure you can start from a position at the bottom, but you'll quickly be recognized for your abilities and your maturity and your ability to work with people and solve problems and communicate effectively, and those skills will let you rise fast. So it won't be as slow a process as it was in the military getting rank or growing through the ranks. It can be a lot faster in the civilian world.
So how did you end up going to the USO?
Interestingly enough, the USO, it was kind of serendipitous how that came to be. It was almost 7 years ago. So what happened was my grandfather had passed. My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps, Air Force retired senior chief master sergeant for 30 plus years, and World War II, Korea, Vietnam veteran. And he was buried with honors at Arlington. And at the cemetery, we came out, the whole family came out here and laid him to rest. And I see my dad was kind of sad about that decision that my grandfather had made fairly late in his life to be buried out here. And so I think my dad was expecting his grave to be a little closer to home, and it wasn't. So it kind of made me think. And my family is originally from back here. I'm actually a Virginia Lee, from the Virginia Lee family that founded the state. And so I kind of figured, why not try to see if I can find something out here. It's DC area should be a lot more it should be easier to find a job as a vet out here. There might be a lot more opportunities. So as soon as I got back home after we buried my grandfather, I went on to LinkedIn, which was brand new at the time. This was 2009, 2010. So LinkedIn had just been invented, and I was on there. I've always been an early adopter of technology. Always, if there's a new website out there that claims to be cool and helpful and it's trendy, I'm on it and trying to build out my profile and see what it's about. And LinkedIn was one of those that I got on early and built out my profile and explained who I was and applied for, looked for jobs in Arlington. The first one that popped up was a job as a staff writer for their magazine. It was called On Patrol magazine at the time. The magazine has since gone its route, but I moved on, found another position here as writing about what we do and our mission, and producing films and that sort of stuff. But the transition was interesting because they did a couple on the phone interviews with me while I was out in California, and then they offered to fly me to Virginia for an interview. And I was kind of floored on that one. I didn't expect that. I'd never been offered to fly across the country for an interview. I kind of assumed if they did want to interview me that I would have to figure out how to get there. Sure. But no, they flew me out, and they put me through the tests and more in-person interviews, and it was like a hot August day, like so hot. Like it's like, I don't know if DC's humid in the summertime,
it gets sticky there. Yeah,
it can get sticky. It's almost it's not Okinawa sticky, but it's close. And
it's built on a swamp, and
right.
which is appropriate.
Right. And so well, of course, I'm not, being from California, I'm from Bay Area, and coming out of the military, I've never been a suit and tie type guy, so I for the first time, was really, buttoned up in a suit and tie, and I was just a bag of sweat. Like, I mean, I was probably head to toe covered in sweat during this interview, and I just remember, the nerves on top of the heat, on top of everything. It was bad.
I had a meeting out there one time with a senator, and not only was it hot and sticky, and so I was sweating my butt off as I left the rail station, but then it rained while I was walking like a quarter mile to get to the Senate building.
Oh,
and by the time I got there, I mean, I was a sticky, smelly, sweaty mess. It was, yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, it was a interesting interview. I felt like everything went well, and went back to California, and they sent me an offer letter and kind of offered to move me out, and so the rest is kind of history. And so I took that offer and came out here. My first real offer, since I'd gotten out of the military, and so I was pretty excited about that. Drove out here, started doing that job, and since then, I at the time, pretty much right when I got here, I started kind of investigating, and how can I use my GI Bill, right? It's one of the very first things you got to use if you're a vet. If you're trying.
Yeah, and you were smart because you got your college degree while you were on active duty, so you're able to use that for a master's, right?
Right. So I started looking right away. Where do I want to go? Where's what's going to be advantageous? What schools are good? I looked at Berkeley. I looked at Mizzou, well-known journalism school there. Looked at Columbia, Georgetown, Harvard, all these places. And so, but one of the keys, not only to get your undergrad while you're in, is a huge advantage, because they paid, most of the time I was in, I think it was 100% tuition assistance was paid for, which you definitely should take advantage of if that's still the case. But not only do you need to get your degree, but you need to make sure it's a regionally accredited degree, which a lot of folks don't realize the difference between regional accreditation and national accreditation. National sounds bigger and better than regional. Regional small, national's big, but it's actually the opposite. Regional accreditation allows you to get into Ivy League schools and Big Ten schools and things like that for your grad school. If you have a nationally accredited degree, you won't be able, you won't get in. That's
interesting.
It's one of the baseline qualifications to getting into any of these schools for graduate school is a regionally accredited undergrad. So a lot of your University of Phoenix type degrees, your arts institutes and things like that are your online schools, a vast majority of them, especially the technical ones, only offer national accreditation, national accredited. So you have to really look at that, make sure that they have regional accreditation with a regional accrediting. Anyway, yeah, get regional accredited school.
Yeah. Otherwise, you limit yourself, and then you have to go back and redo it all.
Right, and that's a huge waste of time. And so, with that, I applied to with Harvard University's Extension School, and went there for master's in journalism. And I think I started that in 2012 while I was working here for the magazine, and kept going at that. And most of the only on-campus requirement was for one class. You had to take one class on campus. And so, I did as much as I could without actually having to go to Boston. And then this last year, I finally asked the USO if I could, take basically a couple months and go up to Boston for a class so I could satisfy that requirement. And they were kind enough to let me do that. So, I, finished my master's last summer. So last May, about a year ago, a year ago today, actually. This is or yesterday is when I graduated. I was also because with most degrees, you also need to get elective credits, right? And so I took advantage of that too, and used my elective credits to get a certificate in web technology. So at the same time I picked up the master's degree, I also got a graduate certificate in web technology, And one of the classes that I did to get that certificate was called User Experience Engineering, and I really, really love that course. It's basically all about figuring out how to make things work better, so that, because things sometimes are built in a way that just make it frustrating to use, especially software. A lot of times software is built by engineers who aren't necessarily the same type of personality or the same type of person as the end user might be, and they might not have the same use case, or they may not even understand why or how the software is being used. And so it was a really cool, interesting course, and basically to try to map that out and understand the use of software before you build it, rather than kind of building the software and then testing it. It was a kind of a paradigm shift, and they invited me back last year to teach. So I was a teaching assistant last fall for that course. So been here doing, so like I said, I started out as a writer for the magazine, and then the magazine kind of was going to get retired, and so we looked at other ways to tell the USO story. We were doing a lot of writing at the time, and less people were reading. To be quite honest, there's a lot of people. Most people digested their news and their information online through video and audio.
I have a stack of magazines over here that I haven't read yet. I mean, there's a stack of magazines I need to go through.
Right, and so it's a thing. So we, me and my boss got together, and we talked about trying to get some funding together so we wrote a white paper and presented it, the case of getting some money to get some video equipment, just bare bones video equipment and a decent computer, so we could edit film. And we would self-teach ourselves, and that was also kind of some of the classes I was in at Harvard were video production courses. So I was getting some formal education in it at the same time. So we made the case, and they bought it, which is great, and they gave us some cash, and we went out and bought some cameras and some computers, and the rest is history. We've been producing short films for the USO for the last 3-4 years.
So can you tell me of the films that you've produced, maybe one or two that are really highlights to you, what the message is?
Oh man, there are so many that are so touching. It's just like, what I love best about my job is that even when I was writing, it's the same thing when I'm producing film. My job is to sit here at my desk and try to make myself cry, really, because if I can effectively make myself cry, then I've touched, I can, that I've effectively kind of, that it's going to touch somebody, and somebody's going to feel something from it, and somebody's going to share it, hopefully. But there's a lot out there that's really touching. There's some pieces that we've done from Black History Month, from Tuskegee Airmen that remember the USO as being that one place that didn't see color. That remember even when there was racism, that the USO volunteers would pull them aside and make things right. And there's a really fun story that I just had the opportunity to tell. Was in the Middle East, just got back from going around the world to Asia and the Middle East to capture some stories, and I traveled with a couple NFL players, Delaney Walker, Byron Maxwell, and Cam Jordan, through the Middle East, and telling kind of their story, and we kind of get to talk about the NFL's partnership with the USO and why that's so important. A lot of people don't realize that the USO works hard to build these partnerships with folks like the NFL, so that we can connect people back home to the things that they love, watching football. They may not realize that the reason why the game is on in every single USO center is because we get free Game Pass. The NFL gives us NFL Game Pass in every USO so that they can watch the game. So it's little things like that. We get to kind of talk about why these things are the way they are, and what makes that happen, and so that's really cool. And just being able to be there to to see the looks on everybody's faces when they,
Where do you go to see the videos? Is it on the USO website or Facebook
Yes.
page? Where's the best place to see
The best place to see what we do is, and to see what I produce is is to follow us on Facebook. That's perhaps the best way, and on Twitter. But primarily, Facebook and Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. It's the USO has many pages on Facebook. Every one of our centers out there has its own Facebook page, but the USO is just simply USO. All the other USO locations will have a specific location after it, like USO New England or USO Bay Area, that sort of thing. So follow us on Facebook. You'll get all of our all the things that we produce will come across your feed. But you can also visit the website. We've got a fairly new website in the last couple of years that was put out, and I think we did a really good job. It's built on a really good platform, and it's really easy to use and see, and all of the stories that we produce can be found there. We also have a YouTube page. If you are looking for a specific video, you can find it on our YouTube page. Just search for the USO. I think our actual YouTube handle is USO #4 Troops.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll make sure and put those links here on the video as well. In closing, thinking back through your experience and your transition, what if you had 3 or 4 biggest lessons learned that you'd like to share with another veteran? Not necessarily somebody that's a journalist or even a Marine, but just if you were to give advice to somebody leaving the military today, what would you say?
Let's see. So I tried to hit on a couple of them already. One, definitely, use your first try to target a company that you want to work with. Like the most important thing I think is for veterans transitioning is kind of happiness, is finding, being proud of what you do, right? Like there's nothing like being a Marine. There's just nothing that's ever going to compare to that. Wearing that uniform is an honor and a privilege, and when you have that uniform on and you can say I'm a United States Marine, there's nothing that really earns folks' respect more than that. So that's why you see a lot of veterans transition into fields like fireman and police officer and things like that, because there's similar pride can be taken in the role and the job and the responsibility of caring for one's community, of putting out fires, saving people's lives, that sort of thing. So it's no mystery why a lot of military folks transition into those fields. It's not because they already have the training. It's more about the pride in their job. And so, find a company that you can be proud of. Find a brand that you can be proud of, that you don't mind wearing their shirt after you get off of work, and you can be seen at the bar or seen around town doing whatever you do, with their logo on your chest, and be proud of it. So I mean that's probably what keeps me at the USO more than anything else, is just the fact that the brand is so strong and does such good work, that I can be proud of what I do every day. So, I mean, going home, being proud of what you do is important for vets. I think
that's huge. Yeah,
that's huge. And so, definitely, target brands that that you like and trust, and are, would take pride in working for. That's one piece of advice. 2, take advantage of your GI Bill, and don't be afraid to to go back to the basic. A lot of guys didn't go to school while they were in, like I did. It was hard to do. I was only able to do that because of my MOS, because I didn't spend a lot of time downrange. So I had unique opportunity and access to school. But even if you didn't, you could, don't be afraid to start at the very bottom, because there's some hurdles that you need to get over first that discourage a lot of people, like some basic, like college level algebra, college level English, things like that are kind of like these low level hurdles. And once you get over them, the rest of your college experience is not going to be quite that challenging. It's a lot different. It's going to be more tailored towards your field. and it's going to be more comfortable for you. It's not going to be so much out of your comfort zone. But those little hurdles that you need to get over first to get into your bachelorette program, to get that associate's degree out of the way, those little tiny hurdles are super important, and they are very difficult, but it's worth the time to spend brushing up on your basic math just so you can pass those tests and get over that little tiny hurdle to get onto the rest of it. I think that probably discourages more veterans, I think, from using their GI Bill and getting their education, I think, maybe anything else. 3, once you are looking at graduating, again, look for the regionally accredited school. It's going to make a difference when you try to get into a good graduate school. Let's see, what else? Let's see, if I had any other advice, it'd be, take the work ethic with you. Take your work ethic with you. There's a lot of people, I own a business as well, and I employ a lot of folks, and it's hard to find good people. It really is, and I think a lot of employers would say that it's hard to find people that have a good work ethic, that are going to show up on time, that are going to do their jobs when nobody's looking. Keep that work ethic that the military instilled in you and bring that to your next employer. They're going to value that. So, definitely keep that work ethic up. If you let that part if you let that part slip, nobody's going to want to hire you. But that's probably one of the most important things that the military instills in everybody. I mean, everybody's got to stand duty. Everybody's got to, be at PT at 05. You figured out how to get there. So figure out how to get there for your job. I think that's pretty important.
Great advice. Very good advice.
Let's see, beyond that, don't let location hold you back. That's one of the cool things about being in the military. Most folks are able to get comfortable relocating. So being a Marine, it was kind of cool because you've got a brotherhood anywhere you go. And so the first couple weeks I was in town in this new job, I was able to make a whole new group of friends within probably 10-15 days. I had 5 or 6 close friends because they were fellow Marines that I just happened to meet at this place or that, and we end up friends. And so it's a fraternity like that. And so you have that advantage, that fraternity, that people that will help and that will be your friend right away if you just open your mouth and start talking to them. So that's an advantage that you have. A lot of people don't have that advantage, and so they have a fear of moving to a new city and moving away from home and to find a job. And if you open that up for yourself, it opens up your options, exponentially to find the position you're looking for, because it might just be in another city, it might just be in another state, it might just be in another country. So be open to that. Let's see, some other advice as far as if those veterans that have good security clearances and things like that, security jobs are valuable, but the important part, and the salaries are really good, and the important part there is your clearance and maintaining it. When you get out, there's a process, I believe, in keeping your clearance active and keeping that good. So if you want to stay in the security field and you want to do some contracting work downrange, make sure you keep your security clearance intact. Let's see. Use your network. I mean, LinkedIn, like I said, LinkedIn of all places was how I got this job, and I've been here. That's
a great resource that veterans need to use, and LinkedIn provides a year's free if you're job hunting.
It does.
They give you the premium service for free.
You get premium service for free, which is huge. Utilize those services. Utilize anything. Networking is anybody you can possibly meet. Somebody knows somebody who knows somebody, and it's in this world, it is less what you know and more who you know. It's gonna get you there. Fortunately, the internet worked for me. It doesn't usually work for most people. It's a little frustrating out there now. I get it. In these days, it's a little bit frustrating for people because everybody says, "Oh, you can't just send an email. You can't just apply online. You gotta got to get in there and talk to people. But then when you go to a company, you go to their front door, they said, no, you got to apply online. You know,
Yeah, but that's why you use LinkedIn to find somebody inside that company.
Exactly.
Because if you search that company and Marine Corps or Army or whatever your specialty is, odds are somebody's profile is going to pop up that has that keyword in there. And now you have an entry into the company that's somebody that's going to be willing to talk to you. That's a great place to get started.
And
hey, John, I'm coming up on the hard stop, so go ahead. One
more. The USO has its transition services as well. So you have to check out what the USO offers. We've just recently partnered with an organization that used to be called RP6. They do a really well-rounded transition services that help out with housing, with jobs, with really anything you need help with. So the USO transition services are out there, and they help, and they're in your city, they're nearby. So utilize that if you can.
Hey, Joe, awesome. Really appreciated the time with you. Joe Lee with the USO, he is the senior multimedia journalist there. Watch for the videos, the USO videos. You'll know the guy that's behind it now after you see this. And Joe, best of luck in the future. Thanks for sharing your story. So glad that Joe got us connected.
Thank you. And it's good to know Jill, and now great to know you. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, next time I get out in your neck of the woods, I'm going to give you a holler. Matter of fact, we have an event. I need to offline do a little bit of maybe get a little time on the phone with you so I can tell you more about what we do. Because we need to be more closely connected with the resources that the USO offers. But we have some things that are going on in the DC area later on this year. And there might be some opportunity for us to connect. So
awesome. Yeah, give me a call anytime.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Right. Take care.
That beautiful rendition of Taps is a public domain recording created and recorded by an employee of the United States government. It is open source and not under copyright protection. Kenny Thomas' song Send Me is used by permission of Kenny Thomas. Isaiah 6:8 was read by Tim Abel. Thank you, Michael Broderick, for the introduction. All work is original or used by permission. This has been a production of Gallant Fuse, the New American Veteran, a member of the Heroes Media Group. All rights reserved.